Hello and welcome back to the NFL DFS Slate Breakdown for Week 7. We got a lot to go over, so we will jump right into it. But before we do, come join us at LineStar. There are a couple ways to get us cheap or free. You can have a free 7-day trial through the app stores, either iOS or Android app stores. We also have these promo offers right down there. Parlay Play, Sleeper, Underdog, Chalkboard, all of them you can get up to 1 month free. LineStar. Just go through our pricing page, follow the directions, and you can get a month free. It's easy as that. Now, let's get into it. We got a lot to go over here, so we gotta dig right in. All right. Last week was an interesting one. I think this week will as well. As always, we're going to start off with a little overview of the slate. So we have, 5 games with high totals, 5 with low totals. It's 10 games on DraftKings. It is still 11 on FanDuel. Once again, they do have that night game on FanDuel. Now, Houston, Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota, Seattle, Atlanta, Carolina, Washington, KC, and San Francisco. All of those are 47 total or more. There's 350 games in there, and then the fastest games of the week actually happen to all be in those games, which I think is interesting. Green Bay and Houston, total of 48.5 is likely the fastest pace of play. Then we also have Seattle and Atlanta in there, followed by Detroit and Minnesota. So I think there's a couple interesting ways we can play this slate, and let's dig in and start going position by position here. So starting with our high owned, we got Jordan Love. He is 19% owned. He is also on the very top of our team defense tool as a good matchup versus Houston. I'm absolutely intrigued with going with Love. My issue is you never know who it's going to be. They really have 5 pass catchers and spread the ball around a lot. So it's really hard to trust a double stack with Jordan Love when he spreads it around so much. And Jordan Love kind of needs to get 2 guys really going to be able to pay off as a quarterback. The other issue with me for Jordan Love is he's been doing good on very little volume. Versus Arizona, 32 attempts, 26 versus the Rams, 54 versus Minnesota. So the one game that you could have used him this year, you could have used him versus Arizona. You're just not winning with 27, but it was usable. 34 versus Minnesota, or 54 versus Minnesota is the one game he actually had volume. 34 in week 1. So that's my one issue with him. I like this game. I like him as a quarterback. We are just going to need Houston to have to push the Packers a little bit for this to really work, which does lead me to believe that if you're going to play Jordan Love, you should definitely have somebody on Houston's side running it back, because that's how this play works. Jordan Love only works if Houston is pushing the Packers a little bit and the game, really gets going. Next, we got Geno Smith, 17% owned versus the Falcons. He's only 5,800. He's in a great spot. We got him 3.2x. The Falcons are not the greatest. Geno is here he is. Falcons 23rd team defense tool. Geno has been really good this year, and he has been chucking the ball a ton. So I am absolutely interested in this spot. The one thing here is that we need some touchdown variance to pop back Geno's way. He is only averaging 1 touchdown a game, and that's just not going to cut it. We need him to get the 3-4 touchdowns for him to really hit. The other thing is he can add, a couple points through rushing with his legs. So I like Geno. I think he's an interesting spot. And the thing that I think is interesting is that because of how aggressive and how much Seattle will throw the ball, they could possibly push Atlanta, which we saw. If Atlanta gets pushed a little bit, we saw it in this the Tampa Bay Atlanta game, that they could really start chucking the ball and go for it. So I think there is a path to this game really succeeding, and I do like Geno. I like his receiving options. He has 3 of them. Pretty much ball only goes to those 3, and then there's Kenneth Walker. So definitely am very interested in that spot. Next, we got Jaden Daniels, 15% owned. It's versus the Carolina Panthers. It looks like it should be an absolute, stud spot. The Panthers are giving it up a ton. They're via the run, via the pass. They're just being a terrible defense like they are. My issue, and this is what I talked about last week a little bit, thinking that last week might have been an interesting spot for Jaden Daniels because he may pass more. And he did, but he was still only 35 attempts. Outside of that, 25, 30, 23, 29, 24. His attempt volume is just not high enough. And at this price, with how hard it is to stack him, Washington Commanders are kind of like how Lamar Jackson has been for years, where you can only use one pass catcher and there's 4 or 5 of them you got to pick from, and it's hard to kind of stack with. Obviously, he does have the alpha in McLaurin, and McLaurin is fine, but he is priced up, so it's a little scary to want to go to McLaurin. But I don't mind Jaden. I personally just am not going to have much of him in this spot. I think he's just priced a little too high for the variance that comes along with him in this spot, where I think Washington would prefer to just run the ball, and I think they're going to be able to versus the Panthers, and I think they're likely to get a big lead, and then it's just going to be all running. All right, Kirk Cousins, 12%. I talked about Geno a little bit. Cousins is another one, and Atlanta as a whole, they need to be pushed. They are absolutely fine just leaning on Bijan, leaning on Tyler Algier, and not chucking the ball around that much. So if Geno and the Seahawks can push them a little bit, then Kirk Cousins does become interesting. And then, you have some cheap receiving options on that team that are interesting also, that will allow you to pay up in some other spots. So I'm fine with going some Kirk. Now, let's get to the guys that are a little bit lower owned, my pivot plays. We got Jared Goff versus Minnesota. I absolutely love this game. Both teams have not allowed you to run the ball, but they have allowed you to pass the ball. Minnesota allowing 286 through the air. The other thing is that Jared Goff really hasn't had games outside of versus Tampa Bay where he's had to chuck the ball around. He has 18 completions in every single game this year outside of the one game versus Tampa Bay where they had to throw it 55 times and he had 34 completions. He only had 2 interceptions and no touchdowns that game, or else, it would have been a huge fantasy game. But I think this is another scenario where Jared Goff might be asked to chuck the ball around a little bit, and he's in a good spot. It's one of the faster games of the week, one of the higher game totals of the week, and I think there is actually paths to great fantasy success and the game kind of blowing up here. So very interested in Goff, and with that in mind, I don't mind Darnold on the other side. I think Darnold's an interesting play. He's been in the 20s, 3 of 5 games. Another spot, he has not had to throw the ball. 31 attempts versus the Jets, but they were in control the whole game. 28 versus Green Bay. They were control. They controlled the game the whole way. Green Bay just had a crazy comeback late. Houston, they won 34-7. San Francisco, 123-17. They were in control. And against the Giants, they were in control. This is finally a game that there is a chance that they may not be in control. They could be down a little bit going into the second half, or, just barely up. And in that scenario, Darnold is going to throw a little bit more. We've seen this Minnesota team through the years really step on the gas and throw the ball when they're put in those positions. And I think this game they're going to be. And without Aiden Hutchinson also on Detroit, that pass rush is going to be a little bit worse, giving Darnold a little bit more time. I love Darnold this week. I think he's in a very interesting spot. Andy Dalton. I think Andy Dalton is the way that I will play that Washington and Carolina game. I talked about my not love for playing good old Daniels. I do really, really like him as a talent and a player, but I think I'd rather go Andy Dalton. We've seen Andy Dalton versus poor offense or poor defenses do very well. Then he played Chicago, who's good, Atlanta, who's decent, and now he's getting a very bad defense in Washington. I think there is a chance that we could see one of those 3 touchdown games from him out in this spot. There's a very good chance that Washington's out to a commanding lead and then Dalton's just chucking it the rest of the game. So definitely a little bit interested in him. And lastly, CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud, right now, the target tree is much smaller. No Nico Collins. You really can choose between Diggs, Dell, and Schultz. And I like all 3 of those options. This is a game that's very interesting. And I don't think you have to bring Packers with you for the whole reason that the Packers, spread the ball around so much. But if I'm using a love stack, I'm definitely bringing a Houston guy with me, because I think the way this game really goes is if Houston is pushing the pace and scoring a lot and scoring early. So very much interested in some Stroud, but probably a little bit less so than the other guys we have talked about. On FanDuel, Jets and Pitt, I'm not interested in the quarterback spot whatsoever. And then there's no other quarterbacks here that we didn't talk about that I'm interested in. And on to running back over here. All right, so high-owned running back, we got Tony Pollard, 31% owned. Look, he was high-owned last week. He did decently. He's back in pretty much the best spot there is, or one of the best spots there are. And there's no Tajay Spears, so I understand people wanting to go to Tony Pollard. My issue, and it's really an issue because he's super high owned and the chance of 2 touchdowns is small. This offense just is not good enough to routinely give him touchdown opportunities. So getting 2 touchdowns on a day, it's not very likely for him. The other thing is because the offense isn't very good, it is less likely that he's going to be able to have a game of 25, 26 touches. A game of 20 to 22 touches can happen, but he's not likely to really put a gotta have it score up with only 20 touches in the week. Now, I don't mind Tony Pollard. I think he's gonna get a good enough workload. I think a median projection is great for him. My worry here is just ceiling. I think he's in a great spot. I just don't know if he really has a ceiling that is high enough where I had to have him. And at 30% owned, I don't know if I'm going to have that much of him. I'll probably go under the field on that one. Kyron Williams, just in an absolute amazing spot. Cooper Kupp is going to be a game time decision. So he's getting a weapon back. The team has just been leaning on him and just giving him insane workload, and it's going to happen again. The Raiders have been terrible. 28th versus RB so far this season, 25th over the last 5 games. Kyron Williams is one of the best matchups on our team defense tool. Everything about it I love. Bijan Robinson, 7,100. Price is up a little bit since last week. We were on him last week. I'm rolling back a little bit. I don't mind him. Obviously, 2 touchdown games and high output games are, there for him. My big worry is just the volume of touches. He got it down on 18 touches last week, 15 the week before that, 11 the week before that. It's just hard to pay 7,100 for a guy that is only going to get that many touches. I just don't really love that spot, but it is a very nice spot. Matchup versus Seattle, who hasn't been great on D and hasn't been great at stopping the run. I just kind of feel like I would go elsewhere in this spot. I don't mind Bijan, not totally fading him, but don't love it. Brian Robinson Jr. All right, we really got to talk about all of the Commanders' backfield here. Brian Robinson missed last week. He has practiced a little bit. He does have a knee issue. It seems like it's lingering a little bit. Because he's practiced, I expect him to play, but versus Cleveland in, week 5, they went up 34-13. He got 7 carries. He had 2 touchdowns, so he's still, fantasy worthy, but he was dealing with this knee injury then as well. Re-aggravated it, didn't come back, sat out last week. Now he's in a spot versus Carolina where there's a very good chance the Commanders are up by a decent lead. So I do like Brian Robinson, but my worry is that they just use all 3 backs between Eckler, Robinson, and McNichols. And if the game does get to a decent lead, 2-3 touchdown lead, I wouldn't be surprised if McNichols is the one hammering it home and finishing this game off over Brian Robinson due to the fact that has this knee issue. Now, if Brian Robinson is the starter and going to play the whole game, I absolutely love this spot and I would have a ton of him. But I do have some worry about that situation as a whole. So I think all 3 backs are kind of in play. Running backs have just absolutely crushed Carolina. They are 32nd in the league, allowing 134 yards and 2 touchdowns a game to the running back. So I love the matchup. I just hate that it's very easily could be a 3-headed monster this week. I'm going to have some access to probably Robinson and McNichols. Maybe a little Eckler, but not much. I just think Eckler is kind of the odd man out here where he's not going to get enough rushing volume. He's not going to get the end of the game volume. So I have some concerns. Now, if Brian Robinson's out, then fire up Eckler, fire up McNeils. I like them both. But we're just in an interesting situation with this running back group because it could be all 3. So, hard to really kind of juggle all that. Next, getting into Chuba Hubbard. You got to love Chuba once again. He's still priced too low. He's averaging 101 yards rushing per game with Andy Dalton, and now he is in a great matchup versus the Washington Commanders. He's used in the passing game and rushing game. It's a great spot. I'm absolutely fine rolling out Chuba again. All right, now we're getting into some pivots. Saquon Barkley is the first one I want to talk about. He's 8% owned. He's going against the Giants, so we have revenge narrative, whole thing here. The Giants have been incredibly good to stop the run, especially lately, but they're missing some key defensive pieces this week, or could be missing, I should say. So make sure you watch practice. But Lawrence could be out and Brian Burns could be out. If those 2 are out, this running game is going to the run defense is going to be way worse. And Barkley at low ownership in a revenge spot is a little bit interesting to me. But you still have to remember Giants been good against the run. Barkley is, however, one of those exceptional backs that can really get it done against anybody. So very interested in him. Next, Joe Mixon, 7,200. 2 full games he's played, he's put up 30. He's off the injury report, so his snap counts should go back up. He's in an okay spot. Green Bay has been decent versus running, but I'm absolutely on board for having a little bit of Mixon. Next, Kenneth Walker, 7,300, 7% owned. Absolutely in on Kenneth Walker in this spot. Falcons have been decent versus the run also. They have been trying they've really been trying to make people pass on them. And so Kenneth Walker isn't in the greatest matchup ever, but 8 targets last week, 8 the week before, 5 the week before that. He's getting involved no matter the game script. So in a game that could be very high scoring, I think you got to take some running back love. There is a lot of ways that he can get it done, especially with them using him so much in the passing game. There's really very few running backs that are, workhorse type. And right now, Eckler is one of them. Walker is one of them. We talked about Eckler and McNichols already. Just kind of want to go over that again shortly. If Brian Robinson's out, I absolutely love these two, Eckler and McNichols. If all 3 of them are in, it's hard for me to really pick one, but I would probably side with Robinson and McNichols. Also, Trey Sermon, Tyler Goodson. Sermon has been questionable all week. The Miami run D is not great. They are 27th. Trey Sermon isn't anything special, but at least he's cheap and likely to get the workload. If he is out, I absolutely love Tyler Goodson in this spot. Tyler Goodson has shown a little flash the last couple weeks in limited work. So if he gets the work because Sermon is out, I really, really do like Tyler Goodson. And I would prefer Sermon to be out and so we could use Goodson. But we'll have to see how that plays out here. So now running back over on FanDuel. Kyren, Tony Pollard are high owned. Breece Hall we have not talked about, but it's going against the Pitt D. I don't really love going against that. So for me, I'm kind of out on Breece Hall, especially when they got Devontae Adams. I'm gonna guess that they're gonna want to use their shiny new toy a little bit. Outside of that, we have talked about all the high-owned guys. We haven't talked about Kareem Hunt, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire is back, so I do worry about this situation, and at 7,700, that is very expensive. I wouldn't be surprised if CEH took some of this volume that is going to Kareem Hunt. Getting over to the team defense tool real quick. Tony Pollard, Kyren, Trey Sermon, Brian Robinson, we talked about them all. Those are all at the top. Only one we didn't talk about is Zamir White, and he's been such dust. It's incredibly hard to want to play him. You could go Madison, but I think we're likely looking at a split backfield here. If Antonio Pierce does anything different over the next day or so, then it might change my mind, but right now, not really loving it. Getting over to wide receiver on DraftKings. Highest owned, Drake London. 29% owned. He is healthy. He's playing well. He's had some blow-up games. I like the spot. I just think that Seattle does need to push them a little bit for London to really be able to have a true breakout game. He's getting the targets. He's doing decently, but the only game that he really broke out was 13 targets for 154. He had 10 targets last week, but it was 6 for 74 and a touchdown. If the game stays close and is higher scoring, there's absolutely a path to London. I like him. Not going to go overboard with him, but definitely interesting. Juju Smith-Schuster. 8 targets for 7 and 130 last week. I think that alone makes it where you do have to consider him. He is questionable. He did have some hamstring thing pop up. Andy Reid has said he's good to go, so I do expect him to play. But I think you got to like the role that Juju had last week, and he had it in 2022 as well. So they trust him. I mean, it's Juju. He's been so hot or cold, but at least with KC, a couple of years ago, he did have some ceiling games. He ran some of the Ray Rice type routes, or Rashee Rice type routes. So I'm interested. I'm just not going overboard. I do think 4K is too cheap for him, so I'm absolutely intrigued to go here. But I also think that you could go Travis Kelce at lower ownership. You just don't have the value play there, but Kelce could very easily get that role this week and not Juju. Darnell Mooney, he's underpriced for his role. 5 targets last week, 16 the week before, 6, 8, 7, 3 week 1, but that was versus Pitt. He's in a decent game script. There's a path. I probably am only going to use him if I'm stacking Kirk Cousins, though, but definitely interested. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love this game. One of the things I talked about on the prop show this week is I think we need to be wary of when we use Amon-Ra St. Brown this year. The reason being is the Lions have been running the ball so well and controlling games so well. We talked about it with Jared Goff. He hasn't had to throw the ball, and Amon-Ra isn't going to break a slate without getting a lot of targets. In versus Tampa Bay, he had 18 targets, had 119 yards. He needs that kind of target volume to really break the slate. So we need Minnesota to be able to push the Lions. I'm probably not playing Amon-Ra without some piece on Minnesota because that game has to stay close. There has to be scoring for Amon-Ra to really break out here. But I am absolutely interested in Amon-Ra. He is one of my favorite spots. He's averaging 90 yards a game versus Minnesota. He's had some blow-up games. Both games last year, he went nuts. 7 for 144 and a touchdown. 12 for 106 and a touchdown. So absolutely interested in this spot and in Amon-Ra. Jamar Chase, 17% owned. I'm probably going to fade this one a little bit. Reason being is Jamar Chase's blow-up games come with big scoring games. And the way this offense works is they're not going to really need to push the offense unless Cleveland is scoring. And I don't think anybody trusts Deshaun Watson to actually do that. So if you play Jamar Chase, have Njoku or Judy or somebody, hoping somebody's breaking this game open on the other side, because that's the way that Jamar Chase likely goes off. Also, without that, he likely doesn't have a score where you have to have. And there's just other spots I like. Terry McLaurin, he's fine. I don't mind it. I just think that most likely the Commanders are going to be running all over the Panthers. And it just takes me away from wanting McLaurin a little bit. It's just a low-volume passing offense. So I am going to be targeting the Commanders in spots where there's an offense on the other side that could really push them. And while the Panthers have some interesting pieces, I just don't think they're an offense that can really push the Commanders. Jalen Coker, watch for Deontay Johnson updates. He's played a little bit, 4 targets last week, 3 the week before. He's 3K, so he's popping a little bit, but I mean, he's a third wide receiver on a subpar team. So you can go there. I don't mind it, but it's no different than going to, a different Ray McLeod on the Falcons or something. In fact, I'd probably rather go to Ray. All right, now some pivots. Let's talk Tank Dell. I think Tank Dell is in a great spot. He is second on our team defense tool. Target volume is there. There's no Nico Collins again. I don't mind Diggs, and I don't mind Dalton Schultz also, but the fact that the target volume is so much slimmer right now without Collins makes me interested in Dell. Jerry Jeudy, 4,800. He's the wide receiver 1 now. I think you got to consider him at that price. Justin Jefferson. This is my favorite play of the week. And the fact that he's not that high owned right now is absolutely wild to me. Look what he's done against Detroit. 39-29 last year. He went for 36, 2022. He went for 39, 2021. 25 his rookie season. He has crushed the Lions. And I think this is another spot where, Vikings may not control the game. Jefferson really hasn't had many second half targets this year because Minnesota's been controlling the game. Just not going to be the case this week. And I think there's just major upside here. So definitely interested in Justin Jefferson. And then Malik Neighbors is back. I mean, he put up 32, 28, and 26 his last 3 games before going out. Now he's in a good spot versus Philly. You got to be a little bit intrigued for some Neighbors. And A.J. Brown, he has 26 and 27 the 2 full games he's played. He's versus the Giants, who he can absolutely crush. Don't mind going some A.J. Brown. Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, I am very interested in both of them. I think there's a high likelihood that Washington's going to have to chuck the ball around. Deontay's had 3 touchdowns in 4 games. He is questionable. He's got a lot going on. Ankle, hamstring, ribs. So make sure we watch injury report, but he's interesting. And then Xavier Legette. He had his first big game with Andy Dalton. And I don't mind going there. He's not running the full route tree, but very, very interesting. Trey Tucker, 4,200. It's a good spot versus the Rams. Not a great defense. Jacoby Myers is doubtful, so Tucker should have a ton of volume again. I mean, he put up an absolute dud the last 2 games, but I would expect he snaps back a little bit, and at 4,200, the role that he should have, I'm interested in. Jameson Williams, I love the spot versus the Vikings. I just want pieces of this game. If you want to go Justin Jefferson and then don't want to pair it with Amon-Ra, you could just go Jameson Williams, save a little bit of money so you can spend stuff elsewhere. I like the Packers offense. I do want to bring up, and I like Jaden Reed because of this. Reed, Wicks, and Watson are all dealing with some nagging injuries. I bet they all play, but there is things going with all of them. Really hard to pick up one Packers receiver. Reed, at least, is the one that we see continually being able to put up a score where you had to have it, 36, 30. He's done that twice this year. He's in a decent spot versus Houston. I don't mind going that way. JSN, I also love DK Metcalf. I think both of them are very, very interesting. And this week 2 huge game that he had coincided with DK Metcalf also having a huge game. So I think you can do a double stack with JSN and DK very easily. Run it back with a Falcon, and it could be an interesting little game stack there. If I'm just playing a one-off from this game, I do prefer DK over JSN, but both are interesting. JSN's cheap, though, so I get it. Noah Brown is some nice value, I think, on the Commander side. He was back, pretty much took the wide receiver 2 role, had 8 targets, and he's 4K. Has a low-volume passing attack, but has an offense, at least, that's moving the ball. At 4K, I am absolutely interested. I'd way rather play Noah Brown than Jalen Coker. DK Metcalf, we talked on. Cooper Kupp, he is a game time decision. If he plays, absolutely interested in him. The target volume could be huge. Maybe they take him out a little bit early if the Rams are up on the Raiders big time, but absolutely interested in some Cup. And then Brandon Ayuk versus KC. KC plays a ton of man, so the man beaters on this team are going to be Ayuk and Kittle. I like them both. And getting over to FanDuel, just make sure Jordan Addison's popping up. He had one big game. It was on 4 targets where he caught 2 touchdowns. Outside of that, he really hasn't done much. Hard for me to really want to trust Addison. If Hawkinson's out, at least the volume's got to go somewhere. There's Justin Jefferson and Addison. So on the radar, I think he's overpriced, though, and overowned. Jamar Chase, Allen Lazard. I can't do Lazard with Devontae Adams there. The target volume's just going to go down so much. Garrett Wilson. The one thing is that Porter is going to be on Adams. So Garrett Wilson may be the pass the least resistance for A-Rod. But you just, the 20 target game's never going to happen with him, with Devontae Adams there. So just know that. I don't love the spot, but it's at least worth bringing up, I guess. And top of the matchup tool, Metcalf, Romeo Doubs, Jerry Jeudy, Monroe. We didn't talk about Tyreek. I don't mind Tyreek, and there's 2 weeks to prepare for the Colts defense that stinks. So a little bit interest. At 8K, though, I think it's going to be very hard for him with Tyler Huntley to put up a score you had to have, and that's my one issue there. So, all right, getting over to tight end. We'll wrap this thing up quick. We got defense after it, but Brock Bowers, 15% owned. I think he's in a slam dunk spot. Love Brock Bowers this week. 10 targets last week, 12 the week before that. He's not only the number 1 tight end, he's the number 1 option on this offense. I think the target volume's there. There's not many guys at 5,800 I prefer over Brock Bowers this week. David Njoku, 7 targets last week. There's no Amari Cooper, so targets got to go somewhere. Njoku's going to get some of them, as well as Jeudy. Jonnu Smith, I don't mind it. They just got to design stuff for him. But he's had a couple games with, 62 receiving yards, 8 targets, 7 targets, 53 receiving yards. I think Jonnu's an interesting spot. Then also Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz has had 2 games of 60-plus yards, and he has regular target volume. Now he's going against the Panthers, where they should be able to score a lot of points. I think Ertz is a very interesting play at a cheap price, and you could bring him back with a Carolina Panthers stack. Or if you want Jaden Daniels, you're offsetting that Jaden Daniels cost a little bit and getting access to him as well. Other ones, Dalton Schultz. No Nico Collins, 6 targets and 8 targets. So target volume is there. He's in a decent spot. Packers 30th versus tight end. Kyle Pitts, it's the game environment we like. I don't necessarily love him, but 4,500, he's pretty solid and has shown, the ability to go 70, 80 yards. Not many tight ends that can do that. Travis Kelce, 10 targets last week, 9 the week before. We're getting back volume Kelce. Very few tight ends can have that volume, and on a team that can put up some points with a 47 over-under. I think Kelsey's in a prime spot and going too low owned. Now, some punt plays. Theo Johnson. He played almost 90% of the snaps last week. He's a rookie, went 3 for 30 the week before, 5 for 48. So there are some targets going there at 2,800. 4 or 5 targets, a chance for the end zone. I don't mind taking that shot a little bit. He's just very, very cheap at 2,800. And then Grant Calcaterra, he had a game last week. I don't love the spot for him. Went 4 for 67, but there's no Goddard, so he's next man up. Tight end on FanDuel, Colby Parkinson, we didn't talk about, 9% owned versus the Raiders. I don't like it. I can't really do it on FanDuel. If he was, say, 4K or something, then yes. But 5,200 when he's around other guys that I like, I'm just not doing it. Dalton Schultz is the same price, and I would way rather Schultz. Bowers, Kelsey, firmly in play over there. I don't really love Conklin. Conklin's cheaper than Schultz or Parkinson, and he's in a good matchup, and he's the Sunday night game. I would rather him over Schultz or Parkinson. So, or not over Schultz, but over Parkinson. Best tight end matchups, we got Jonnu Smith, Dalton Schultz, George Kittle, David Njoku. All of them we've talked about, and let's wrap it up with some defense. High-owned defense, Bills, Dolphins, Browns. Browns versus Cincy. I don't love that defensive spot, but they're only 2,500, so they're popping a little bit. Dolphins, I think, are very interesting versus the Colts. Colts are beat up. Pittman's going to play, but he has a back injury. No JT. You got Anthony Richardson back that throws the ball all over the place and is a little wild with it. I think there's pass, and they're just not outside of 31 to Tennessee. They're not allowing a ton of scoring, but, the offense is going to have to do something for this to really play, because if the offense can't move the ball, Colts have good field position all game, and it's not going to go well for Miami. Bills are an obvious play versus Tennessee. It's just anybody versus Tennessee at this point. Giants are a little bit interesting at 2,500 versus Philly. I mean, it's a divisional game. The Giants' defense has been good. The other aspect is Jalen Hurts hasn't been that great. Another one I liked was Colts versus Miami. Miami's offense has just been absolutely trash, so might as well try and go pick on that. Outside of that, defense is actually pretty tough this week. Good luck, and we will see you next week. I got to wrap this up. You all have a good one. Have a great weekend. Let's make some money. Peace.